Hi folks, we're Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about rents or house prices generally, I guess, but rents in particular across Sydney. Now, the argument, which is a globalist talking point all across the Western world, the globalist talking point is that mass migration has nothing, absolutely nothing to do with increasing rents that have gone up at three times the rate of wages. That this is just perfectly natural, just perfectly ordinary. When there couldn't be a more grotesque untruth doing the rounds than that. But and I'm old enough now to remember the days when the rent would take up 18 to 20% or so of your income. Unlike today when it's 55, 60%. This is assuming, again, the average wage. Now, I was just looking at a few charts, and you really have to crunch the numbers yourself, but I was looking at a few charts on rents in 2019 and rents just I think it was 6 months ago, the period ended, and just crunching the numbers there. Now, this is in outer suburban Sydney, so we're talking in the far outer suburbs. So say in peak hour traffic, it would be a 2.5 hour commute to the downtown, so that type of distance. And the rents are 40%, a little over 40% higher than they today. The rents today are a little over 40% higher than they were then. Now, there was a bit of a shake-up here when COVID was on, when they could work remotely, that sort of thing. They didn't have to commute. They might go and stay in their weekender or might spend 6 or 12 months in an outer suburban place that's closer to the forest and these sorts of things, and work from there. And then now they've gone back into the city when this remote work has, well, it hasn't completely ended, but certainly lessened. Even so, the rents are still not everywhere. It's a little bit patchy. The closer you are to a transport hub, things like that, or the closer you are to, say, I don't know, water views and so on, the higher the rent will be on average. But effectively, that's the difference. Now, if you look at the increase in wages over that time, again, you see that same formulaic thing. The prices are going up at roughly 3 times the rate of, a little bit over, but around 3 times the rate of wages. And if you look at the cost of food increase over the last 12 to 18 months, just recently I went to buy something in the shop a couple of days ago and noticed that about a year ago I was paying $8 for this product, and today it's $11. So that just gives you an idea of the and I'm coming across this all the time, the increase in food prices. And then if you look at the increase in the energy prices due to the green insanity that the globalists are forcing across on us all across the Western world, then you can see how a lot of people, of course, are getting squeezed. Now, this idea of 40% increase in fucking rent in three years, this is insane. And it's all happening, again, because of globalist policies that are leading to this mass migration, but not simply mass migration. This is a case of high churn rates amongst investment properties. People that have paid a premium price for their property will want a higher rent. People that bought the property years ago, before the mass migration forcing up the price, people who bought the property years ago, they don't have the same pressure on them to get the rent. They don't need the higher rent, so they're not agitating over it. But so you see when a new investor buys a property and the rent can more than double, just on the basis of that transaction. But I just want to highlight the not simply the rents are going up in the mass migration, but the amount of offshore buying, which is increasing the churn rate and the price paid for real estate, and thus not only the rents charged, but the amount of properties that are withdrawn from the market when it's an overseas buyer that's buying them. So now, a while ago, I was talking to a real estate agent it's a fairly big real estate outfit, and he's like in charge of building maintenance and property maintenance, things like that. But he was telling me about all the properties he's got to rent or that his company's got to rent, and they were all, so he claims, they were all offshore owned. So all these properties are owned by Chinese Communist Party generals, Indian Brahmins, whatever, but they're not owned by local Australian investors. They're owned by offshore people who've paid. They don't care what they pay. They're just money laundering. And if the property's only worth $1 million, they don't care if they pay $2 million. It's irrelevant because they just want to launder the money. And that of course changed drastically. But I wasn't aware of the amount of and when he said that all the properties they have for rent are all owned by offshore, have offshore owners, I was, holy crap, I can't believe that. Aren't any of them no, all offshore. And I thought, wow. And that's also a big thing that never gets talked about. You really got to dig and struggle to find anyone that's prepared to talk about that. But not only do you have the mass migration forcing up rents in a couple of ways, but you've also got the offshore buyers who are just paying crazy money for properties just for the purposes of money laundering. Now, the other side, and I've mentioned this a few times before in other videos, it's not just simply cashed up immigrants that are coming here. It's when they move in and they move into they'll get a 2-bedroom apartment and 20 of them will live there. And because they've got, even though they may be cleaners and dishwashers or whatever, their incomes are low because there's 20 of them, and they pool their money. Now they're living, matches on the floor, the bunk beds, and they're working in shifts. And as soon as one person gets off the mattress, the other person falls into it. That type of stuff. But because there's so many of them in the apartment, the real estate agents and the owners are jacking up the rent. So they're saying, well, if just a family moves in, the mum, dad, and the 2 kids or something, then there's only the advertised rent is the rent. The rent's whatever, $500 a week or something. Then that's the rent. But when they get 20 Indians or whatever moving in there, the real estate and the owner go, hey, here's an opportunity to jack up the rent. So instead of $500, we'll lick these dudes $1,000. We'll just turn because it's illegal to have that many people in a 2-bedroom place. We'll just turn the other way and pretend it's not happening and collect $1,000 rent. So the real estate agent rakes a bit more, and the owner, of course, pockets a bit more. And so by gaming the system, which really is, they're able to. But it creates an artificially high threshold for rent, which is again part of the reason why the rents go up. Now you'll notice in the thumbnail some rundown shithole there that's for rent, but there'll be Indians and people from the third world will still rent that. It's still got running water. It's still got electricity. It's way better than what they ever had in fucking India or out in the middle of nowhere. So they'll rent that place and they'll pay top dollar for it, but they'll fit 20 or 30 people into it. So it'll become mini rural Indian peasant village just in one house. And to them, again, it's improvement on what they had. The council really should, the local county council should shut that place down as being uninhabitable, but they won't. There'll be a lot of Indians on the council, this sort of thing. Governments and all sorts of people will be leaning on them to say, hey, we want more migrants, don't upset those people. So there's all sorts of artificial forces, political forces that are working to push up the price of real estate. None of it's organic. None of it's market driven. It's all ideological and political. But it's turning day-to-day living in Australia and other Western countries into an endurance test, and incomes are no way keeping up with all this political ideology and what I would regard as outright treachery that the governments at all levels in the West are inflicting upon their own citizens. Being a Tacitus, your pushback channel, and thank you for listening.
Welcome.